Evening, everyone. We're going to talk Brakiri. There we go. Brakiri Cruiser. Alright, now, I've done all the fine surface sanding. Well, I thought I had. I just found a good nick in one piece. But that's okay. That area is going to get some heavy-duty sanding in a little bit. Let me explain how I did the surface sanding. I started off with my trusty old 600 grit white dry sandpaper, this stuff. And here's my setup for doing the sanding. Pour water in this tub, set it out on the table. I put this blue towel in my lap because the water always drips while you're sanding. And I sand. And this keeps the powdery stuff off my lap. That failed. Reason being, this thing had some pretty strong parting lines on it, or seam lines, and I had to get rid of them. So I switched to this stuff, 320 grit. This took those parting lines out for the most part. They're not 100% gone because they're a little bit more, they're deeper in the resin than I would like in a few spots. Boy, that one spot is bothering me. I'll take care of it in a minute though. Anyhow, so another thing I did, other than the 600 grit sandpaper, is I use one of these little sanding sticks. I got mine at Hobby Lobby because the sandpaper really was not getting in areas around like these knuckles right here, okay, or up underneath here, and this did. And when I was done with that 320, then I hit the entire model with 600 grit sandpaper. I can still see a spot or there where I didn't get things 100% correct, but it's really close to, the final surface on this thing I want. Now, I've done all that. What's up next is I'm going to wash this thing, because once it's washed and scrubbed down, then I can start filling in these micro voids. Lots of micro voids on the front of the ship. This is the front, okay, and this is right side up. There's another part. One of the wings here had a lot of micro voids in it as well. And I'm going to have to get those micro voids out. I want to wash this and get the mold release off of it before I do any of that. And here's why. This is a resin kit. It is a garage made model. This one probably not. This came from one of the bigger resin kit companies, but that's beside the point. Most of the time these are made in someone's garage. So there's going to be irregularities in the molding process. Second off, since it's a garage kit, the people who are building these things, this makes a good hammer. The people who are building these things don't have the tools and equipment that one of the larger kit manufacturers would have. So when you pull the styrene, when the kit company pulls the styrene out of the molds, they can wash them. Probably go straight from the mold straight to a detergent solution designed specifically to remove that mold release, and then they clean it up, box it, and ship it. Now these guys, no telling what they're using for mold release. It could be as simple as Vaseline. I don't know anything about resin models molding process, so don't ask me, okay? But I'm pretty sure a thin layer of Vaseline would work as mold release. It could be, and don't quote me on this, but wouldn't surprise me if spray Pam works as a mold release. Wouldn't surprise me. So there's no telling what the mold release is. So I'm going to go scrub this and get it off there. I can see it in spots on the surface of the kit that my 600 grit sandpaper did not take it all off. I'm going to show you that in a little bit, but I want to talk through a few other things real quick. Yeah. So here's the order. I did my surface prep. Got rid of all the parting lines or mold lines. Next up is getting the parts to fit together correctly. Okay? These two parts, and you can see they put a pretty decent sized pin on there, fit together about that well early on. Okay? I'm holding it off in a little bit because I've already done some of this, but there was a pretty good gap in it. Then I came in with my files and just gently worked it down to where now the two parts made up fairly well, and I have a minimal amount of seam filling to do on these two parts. I have to go through and do that for all the parts on this kit. Okay? Some of them we're going to need more than others. Okay? For instance, you can see the pin here on the tip of the wing. There is no corresponding hole in this yoke right here on either side of it for the pins. The hole doesn't exist, so I got to drill that hole to get these to match up right. Okay? Before I do that, I got to do some test fitting to get things to match up correctly. Another problem area, well, not these two parts. These two parts actually made up pretty well. Okay? But there are some issues with how they fit together. Like the gray part is above the white part over here, so that's going to have to be smooth. There's a pretty decent gap between these parts right here. I'm going to have to remove that. They don't round off correctly here. I'm going to have to fix that. And again, they don't round off correctly on that end. There's a pretty good seam line along here to be removed. So there's things like that. The wing only goes on one way, and I always never get it on straight. They are pinned a very specific way, so they only fit on one particular orientation, like apparently I just found. Nope, that doesn't fit quite right. Let me get the other wing. See if I can find this orientation. I know that's wrong. It's got to be this way. Or let's do it this way. Yeah, see? Now that wing sits down on there really, really flush and really well. But I take this other wing. We're going to put this back where you guys can see what I'm doing and hold my lap. This wing's supposed to go on this way, and you can see doesn't quite line up all the holes correctly. And you can also see this isn't quite smoothed out correctly. So I'm going to have to do some fitting and drilling. One of the things I advise with working with any resin kit is a lot of test fitting before you actually glue. Okay? So I'm going to have to go through and do a lot of that. The wing here, you can see that's not mating up very well, so there's going to have to be some work to get that wing to mate up. The stop wing here, again, that mates up horribly. So I'm going to have to do some sanding and some fitting to get things to mate up correctly. There's like a huge gap in this wing. So I've got to flatten this out and get this smoothed up. These are things you don't address in styrene kits. That's one of the reasons why they're rated skill levels higher than styrene kits. Alright? Once I'm done with getting all the parts made up, then I can start gluing together. But before I really glue together, I have to get my stand planned out, because this guy gets drilled in here somewhere like this, and you're going to need that clearance because you got this big fin coming off the bottom of this thing about like that. So there's a reason they gave a pretty hefty brass rod with this thing with a pretty good length on it. So I have to plan out the stand for it. That's not trouble. Just stopping to my local hobby shop and buying a piece of wood and cutting it and fitting it. So here's the step. Prep, surface prep, wash, get parts to fit, glue, then I can seam fill. Okay? So I got some work ahead of me. I'm going to stop this little segment, move all this into the kitchen, and start cleaning parts. You know, sometimes I clean them on styrene kits, sometimes I don't. Always clean resin kits. Alright, back in a bit. Alright folks, sorry for the unconventional camera angle, but you're going to be able to see better. Cleaning. Comet cleanser. I mean, if that's what the directions say, that's what I'm going to use. Getting the water started. I have a towel laid out over here. You can see some of the parts are laying out on the towel. Fortunately, this is a largish model, so I don't have any problems with that. I'm going to use my hands. I'm going to get here and scrub this thing. Okay? Because I want to try to get a lot of that off there. And I'm not going to put a lot of pressure on it. I am going to scrub it. And I'm using my hands simply because I've got such a nice finish on it already. I just want to try to encourage the rest of that mold release to go away. Okay? And this is what I'm going to do to clean this thing. I'm not going to bore you by cleaning the entire thing on camera. quite literally, I am just scrubbing her down with some Comet Cleanser. I'm using my hands to scrub with. I might use a rag to help me. I might not. Okay? I just want to make sure I get the oily mold release off these pieces. That really feels like I got that off there. That feels a lot different than it did when I put it in there. So on to the next part. Again, I'm going to sprinkle some Comet on there. Don't need that much, so I'm going to put some of that on some of the other parts. Set them aside. And I'm going to start scrubbing. Because again, my goal here is to get the mold release off. I don't need to scrub the crud out of it because I've already sanded it really well. Smoothed it out. Again, I'm just trying to get the extra mold release off that the sandpaper didn't catch. Now the end pieces here, they worry me a little bit because that's where the glue goes. But I haven't worked them much. So they're going to get worked pretty hard in a little bit. I'm also, yeah, see, I can tell that. You can tell with the water. Okay, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can see the sheen on that. The side piece, the sheen is different. I can tell that there's some oily mold release on the end of this still. So sandpaper took a lot of it off. But not all. This is why you scrub up resin parts. Alright? That get it? That got it. And not completely, because again, that's holding a solid sheet of water. So is that. That tail root isn't. I'll be back. I'm going to have some work to do on this. I'm getting the scrub brush out. Show you then. Okay, I got all the kit parts washed up. I'm going to let them here to dry overnight. Now, one thing about this is you need to wash the parts if it's resin. You know, I didn't think so. I thought the sanding would get them all taken care of. I decided to err on caution and wash them. I'm really glad I did, because there were some places I didn't get the mold release off when I sanded. And I could tell when they're under the water where the mold release was and where it wasn't. And it took me a good 15 minutes to scrub all these parts to make sure all the mold release was gone. And I did get a sponge out that had a Scotch-Brite pad on one side, one of these guys, yellow-green sponges, and use it to help me scrub these parts because it wasn't working by hand with my hands. But anyhow, do wash your resin parts before you glue and paint. Just need to do it, okay? I've got some delicate parts. I'm not going to be able to scrub them that way. So what I plan on doing with the four delicate parts is I want to put them in a bucket of water, a little plastic jug of water with some dishwashing soap in it, and let them sit for overnight and see if that'll knock the mold release off. I've seen other people do that on YouTube videos, so that's what I'm going to do as well. Alright, there's my update. Hope you enjoyed. Next up, getting all those parts to fit together correctly.